Hello and welcome to the Digital Innovation North podcast. This podcast connects technology leaders to ideas, information, and insights that drive digital innovation right here in our region. Our guests are technology leaders from innovative companies and experts from SDG. SDG is Solution Design Group, empowering innovation for over 35 years. Hello and welcome to our first ever Digital Innovation North podcast, part of the SDG Podcast Network. I'm your host, Molly Doyle. Today's topic is product renewal. If you've tried to implement a product approach, shifting from project to product and struggled, or haven't started on a product operating model because you're not sure it's worth the effort, or you just want to add some juice to what you guys are already doing, this podcast episode is for you. We will recap the benefits of a product model, share some examples of success, and provide ideas for how to begin or continue the journey for maximum impact. Joining me today is my guest, Jason Scherschligt. Jason has over 20 years of experience in product management and user experience leadership. He has served as a digital product manager for a major newspaper, led product management for an online university suite of digital experiences, and held executive roles as head of product for day one startups as well as legacy brands. In 2020, Jason co-authored the first edition of the North Star Playbook with lead author John Cutler. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to work alongside Jason as he is the head of the product consulting practice here at SDG. We hope the conversation will fully re-inspire your product journey and accelerate your results. And at the end, Jason will reinforce product thinking by sharing a model that you can use in your future work. Thank you, Jason, for sharing your expertise with our guests today.
Hi, Molly. Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
I'd like to start by asking you to share, just to ensure all of our listeners are on the same page and we're all starting from a common foundation, what is a product operating model?
Yeah, a product model is a model that emphasizes building technology and even services, perhaps, that is designed to optimize the value a business is delivering to its customers. And maybe a helpful way to think of it is in opposition to another common operating model, which is the classic traditional IT project, where what you're really emphasizing is delivering requirements on a timeline and on a budget, and that's all wonderful stuff. But a product mindset and a product model is designed to emphasize the outcomes that we're producing. So rather than say, hey, we got everything done on time and on budget, and we met all the requirements, which might just say we did the wrong thing well, what we're instead measuring our success by is the value that we're delivering so that our customers will continue to purchase our product and renew with us and expand, et cetera.
Excellent. What are some examples of product teams? Meaning, if you're moving into a product model, how would you organize your work? What would a product team look like?
Yeah, a product team is one of the most important concepts in product. Empowering a team to deliver value. The kind of classically, we say that a product team comprises a triad or a trio. Usually it's a product manager, a user experience leader, and an engineering leader. And really those three functions are concerned with three areas of concern. They are value and viability of the product, which is primarily the concern of the product manager, desirability and usability of the product, which is the concern of the UX team and the UX leader, and feasibility. How are we going to go about actually making this thing, which is the concern of the product development or product engineering leader as part of that triad. So you can really think of product as an effort to figure out what is the product that is all of those things, that is usable and valuable and desirable and viable and feasible. And all these teams come together to work on that.
That's super helpful because I do think folks might think it's easy to think about product when you're thinking about a physical good, right? You're, a
Sure.
widget or roller skates or whatever.
Yep.
I didn't think of roller skates. But it's maybe a little more difficult to conceptualize what is product when you're in a digital world. What are some ways to formulate product in digital, right? How do people organize
Yeah.
digital products?
Yeah, and it can be easier if you're a software company that is actually selling licenses, a SaaS product or something, either or downloads or something for a consumer app or a B2B app. Where I think it gets interesting and perhaps more challenging is products for companies who actually are selling something other than product. You mentioned roller skates, and I'm just riffing here, but perhaps there's some digital roller skate configuration that a consumer might do in order to customize their roller skates that come to them. Maybe there's a network of roller skate dealers, or there's some roller skate supply chain where the digital experience actually enables the purchasing or the using of those products. So I think we can manage those as products as well, even if a physical item is the thing we end up selling to our customers.
Well, I sure did pick an obscure product in roller skates, but let's just go with that. So you pointed to, the online experience of the order purchasing and the just regular
Yep.
online order management, right? Is that a product, order management?
It sure could be. I mean, an
Okay,
example, not to avoid your wonderful roller skate example, but I bet a lot of our listeners are familiar with ordering coffee through Starbucks. And
sure.
through the Starbucks mobile app, obviously Starbucks makes coffee, and we tend to think, well, what is Starbucks product? Well, it's these caffeinated hot beverages and various other, snacks and variants of hot beverages, et cetera. But they have enabled the ordering and paying for of their product through a great digital experience. That's how, if my daughter was going to be coming over to my house and we said, hey, why don't you go pick up some coffee on the way? We'll order it for you. She was able to run into Starbucks and the coffee was sitting there with her name on it. Actually, my wife's name on it because my wife had ordered it, and she had 3 beverages, one for her and one for me and one for my wife, and she brought it over to our
Super
house.
complicated. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a way that we could order a coffee so that when she came over to our house, she could, pick up the coffee along the way, and it was all paid for, et cetera. And that whole experience is, I would argue, a product for Starbucks just as much as the coffee itself is.
Yeah. And just to put a pin in that, so what would you guess that they call that as a product? Is that
Um,
online ordering or mobile
yeah, they would
pickup
call
or?
it like the Starbucks mobile app, and they would have something like Starbucks ordering. Sometimes I've seen things like major retailer, for example, manage the checkout experience as a product.
Okay,
So
that helps.
checking out at a major retailer where they probably want to maximize, they'll think in terms of metrics. They want to maximize number of items in the cart and speed through the ordering process and reduce abandonment rates and things like that. I'm sure there's metrics like that they manage,
Yeah,
but they'll even have a team. And again, this is a major retailer who probably generates their revenue through selling, household
right,
goods or whatever.
right.
But they manage that digital experience. And it's not just the total mobile app, it's the very niche part of the checkout experience
Yeah.
as a product.
Well,
That's
you
another
pointed out
good
that is a
example.
niche and it's within a bigger ecosystem. So is it sometimes
Yep.
challenging for organizations to figure out where the edges are of a product, or do they tend to share a platform kind of outside of product definition,
Yeah,
right?
and that can be a challenge for companies to figure out, well, how am I going to actually organize my own products? There's a variety of ways to do it, kind of depending on where you are in your overall product journey and product maturity. One simple way to do it is just think of stages of the user experience, and figure out, sort of good uh, divisions between those stages. Maybe it's, as we're talking about, a major retailer, maybe it's something like the browsing experience, and then the product selection experience, and then the checkout
Oh,
experience, or something like that.
yeah.
One thing I suggest companies do as well is even if there are these kind of, picture them vertically, this set of stages, there's also sort of a horizontal platform product that might include things like design systems and an overall data model, so that when I select a product and put it in my cart and then check out, I'm having a consistent user experience throughout as well.
So those things that need to kind of hang together, like you're talking about data, you're talking about branding and messaging and just the sort of interface, if you will. So are there certain things that stay outside of a product team and they operate more as kind of a core? Or
things like I sometimes think of those as platform or system-wide sorts of things. I do think they can be managed though, but their users might be a little bit different. For example, those platform teams might have as their customers or their users the other product teams, versus the kind of the end customer. And then those other product teams are making the experiences, or kind of managing and identifying and discovering and delivering the experiences for the end customer.
Excellent. That makes sense. So given the sort of organizational realignment that's required, why would organizations bother? What are some of the reasons why people go down this product journey process?
Yeah, it's really about value. What's the best way to ensure that the work that we're doing is designed to delight the customers or satisfy our users, even if they're internal users, make their workday easier or make them, more able to perform their jobs or things like that. The product is an exchange of value, and the job of the product team, the product manager and other leaders as the leaders of that team, is to maximize that value exchange or reduce the friction in that value exchange. And like I said earlier, that's a kind of a different mindset than a IT project model, where what we're trying to do is get the thing done on a timeline and on budget. Sometimes I say, and people who've heard me talk have probably heard me say this too many times, that a way to think about the difference between managing a project and managing a product is you manage projects to end and you manage products to endure or to last. And that kind of is a simple one-sentence way to help think about the value of a product model.
I do really like that clarity. I think that's a really good quotable quote. So what are some of the benefits if you're focused on that delivery to the customer and you're focused on customer value? I would assume that that's supposed to lead to some good metrics. It's supposed to lead to retention. It's supposed to lead to higher revenue. Is that being found out to be true?
Ultimately, the product metrics that we're driving should result in ultimately good business metrics, new customer acquisition, retention, et cetera. In fact, certain measurement frameworks, like the North Star framework, I did some work on that framework and some publishing on that framework, are designed to drive a metric that's more of a leading indicator, like we're seeing certain things happen in our product that give us confidence that the lagging indicators, which are actually the business metrics that we care about, like customer retention and revenue and such, that those are going to happen because we as a group have been, as a product team, have been driving some key input metrics to drive a North Star metric, which we believe will result in the business results that we want to see.
Yeah. And are you aware of, or can you share with some folks who are listening about, this has worked and here's the proof, right? So the metric, those both, I love that you've got those leading indicators because you want to see that incrementally we're headed in the right direction. But, what could you share with our audience about this actually works, this actually makes an impact?
Yeah, I think that's important to understand, is that when we talk about product models, it's not some crazy idea. It's how so many successful companies operate. companies that you interact with all the time, digital experiences that you interact with all the time, Google and Netflix and Facebook and Apple and Spotify and all sorts of systems. I'm talking there about consumer apps, but also B2B apps and Salesforce, et cetera. They have product teams and product managers who are organized to maximize the value exchange of those products. I'm kind of remembering this off the top of my head here, but there's a great example from Netflix, how early in their journey to becoming the dominant, entertainment brand that they are now, back when they were shipping DVDs.
I do remember that.
Yeah, you remember that you'd go onto this website and you'd say, I want to get a movie, and it would show up in the mail, and then you'd watch it on Friday night. And the problem that they had is, I think, what's that?
You had to wait for days to get your
movie.
You had to
wait for days, exactly. And I think they had this problem of getting the consumer to think differently about, like, why would I do that versus just like I always did, go into the video store, Blockbuster or whatever, and browse the aisles and pick my movie that day and then bring it home and watch it. And then I know it was something I was in the mood to watch that night, rather than having to decide, 4 days ahead of time what I wanted to do on Friday night. And they did some work to identify a key metric, and I won't get the details of it right, but it had to do with the number of users who were filling up their queues. Because the big shift that Netflix wanted to make was not just, instead of going to the store, you're going to get it in the mail. What they wanted was the idea that you're subscribing to an ecosystem of content, and you can populate what you want to watch. So they, as a North Star metric, identified, we want to have, and again, I won't get this exactly right, but we want to have a certain number of people, or a certain percentage of our users adding a certain number of movies to their queues within their first 3 usages of the system. And so then they would design the user experience and their language to emphasize not just order a movie for Friday night, but fill up your queue. And that was actually a pretty strategically important thing. And they could measure that. And again, they would get that sense then that would lead to the business metrics that they wanted to drive.
Very interesting. I love it. Are there some organizations where product model just isn't worth doing? It's not a good fit, right? There's some companies that I'm aware of where they're just like, it's just too hard for us, or we're just not willing to make that shift. Are there places where it's not a good fit?
Yeah, I don't know that I'd say it's a certain type of company, but it might be a certain type of initiative, or field of work. If you're going to, if you have some IT initiative where you understand what doneness means, and you really do want to drive to be done by a date. We're going to implement a new ERP system or something. And once we have that ERP system implemented, we're going to sunset the old system, and the team's going to kind of disband, and we're going to wipe our hands and say, sweet, we got the thing done. I wouldn't say that is the right initiative for a product model.
Got it.
Use the product model if you want a team to endure for a long time, if funding is going to expand multiple projects, if users are going to have a variety of choices and ways of doing things, so we're going to want to test it, when there's a variety of potential solutions, when we know that we're going to have new information coming in that's going to change our direction, that's all a good time to adopt a product model. Very
helpful. You mentioned, users and how they might use your system differently and different options and features. I think that's one of the key benefits of product, right? Is this really deep focus on how are your customers using your products and services? What are their real needs? How do you really solve and build that kind of sticky relationship where they come to trust that you're going to solve their problems, right? So what are some of the ways that the product mindset helps with getting closer to your customer, and some of the techniques even that you can use to kind of dig out and get closer?
Yeah, it's a great point. Fundamental to delivering great products is understanding the people you're doing it for. Like I said, it's kind of the value exchange between the users or customers and the company. So some things I like to emphasize include getting everybody, or certainly more people than just the user experience researchers, but getting everybody in the team engaged in understanding who the users are, who the customers are. I could give you many examples from my own career of getting out into the wild where the customers are, where the users are, and actually experiencing things in their context. You learn so much more than you do with just sitting in your cubicle, sort of speculating on what you might deliver.
Yeah.
In fact,
Right.
product folks have an acronym that I've used for a long time called GOOBing, G-O-O-B, which just means get out of the building. So if you're making, I'll give you an example. If you're making
But Jason, it's so
software,
much easier to use your subject matter experts, right? Like
yeah,
people
yeah,
tend to
no,
think, oh, we've
get
got
out of the
this.
building.
Yeah.
Yeah. An example, I did some work on a dental practice management software system. And you realize that in a dentist office, you might think, oh, that's just kind of a boring office. But there's things like, people with their mouths spread open, and maybe there's fear and anxiety and children who aren't sure what they're going to need to do. So, and rubber gloves are being worn. So there's all sorts of just kind of interesting contextual things you discover when you, again, get out of the building into the dentist's office. I've had similar experiences with ed tech. K to 12 ed tech, you've never quite understood the challenges of using a piece of educational software for a second grade teacher until you've seen it in a room with 25 7-year-olds who have competing needs and levels of understanding and ability to read. So there's just all sorts of interesting things you discover when you get out into the wild.
Yeah. And are
And I
there
think
services?
I think related to that, it's really valuable. I think I mentioned this to not just think that's the domain. Well, the product person will go experience what the users experience. It can be really great to expose the engineers, the technical architects to these things. They can sort of feel the pain of their users. And people, we tend to be empathetic to our customers, and we want to do right by them. So get an engineer observing someone. We've maybe all seen an engineer watching someone struggle through a system that they designed, being like, don't you understand? You just click here and move that, and then that data will show up there. Wasn't that clear to you? But if you watch someone going through that pain, you're going to want to fix it for them.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also concepts of like user experience labs, right? Physical
of course,
products that track your eye movement and where do they go on the page and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Well, thank you. I feel like we've done a kind of a good recap of just sort of the basic foundations of what product looks like. I want to shift a little bit now to thinking about those companies that are maybe just feeling a little just dusty about like, what are we getting from this? What do we need to do to optimize all the investment that we're making in this product journey? What are some things that you would offer as advice to companies where, they've done what they can and maybe they're just not quite seeing a return for their investment in their value? What would you offer?
A few tips might be, one, start where you are. Don't get sort of overwhelmed by the size of an effort. We use these huge words like transformation, as if, the entire company is going to become different, but small, iterative, continuous improvements can help. One piece of advice that's pretty pragmatic is to start small. If you've got a massive, user experience and you want to start operating on a more product model instead of just executing IT projects, pick kind of one user segment or one corner of the experience to manage more iteratively through product thinking and product models, versus saying, well, we have to now figure out our whole user experience and assign product managers to each one and engineering leads to each one and get them all trained up on product thinking. It can be that can be daunting, I think. I would advise pick, one corner of the experience. I'll add one other thing, and especially if you are going to maybe start small, think a little bit differently about funding. And I know that rolls up to, annual operating planning and CFOs and budgets and things that maybe are established before and beyond the domain of a product manager, the product managers themselves. But that if a team gets funded to solve a problem versus to execute a project to done, that funding is so important because that's where they sort of get their mandate, like this is what we're required to work on. And if you're required to work on solving a user problem through great product versus to execute a set of requirements on time and on budget, according to the estimates that we made at the beginning when we didn't even know anything, that project thinking and project funding has a different set of expectations that go with it than instead, we're going to fund a group of smart people with the right cross-functional talent. We're going to give them access to the users. We're going to give them data about, how the impact that their work is having. We're going to give them the kind of psychological safety and freedom to iterate and experiment. And when they learn something didn't work, to cheer because they got smarter today and now they can go down a different path instead. All that stuff, I think, requires a different way to think about what we funded and empowered and put that team together to do.
Yeah. It seems like if you've organized your work around solving a customer problem, it's just a little more engaging for the everyday worker bees. Like,
I think it is. I mean, that's what people want to do. They want to make the world better. They want to solve problems of people. They want to see that the work that they've done has had an impact on somebody. And by doing so, we're starting to build our business as well. I think it's a more satisfying way to work, certainly.
Yeah. If somebody's gonna reinvest in their product journey and put some new juice behind it, you mentioned pick a corner, pick an area of the business where you want to have an impact and solve for something. Is there an exercise that you recommend going through to help them determine where to put that priority?
Great question. It probably does help to start with some high-level story mapping and journey mapping sorts of things, and then seeing, based on that kind of a story map, where is there something that's fairly self-contained and also somewhat ill-defined. There are multiple options before us on how we could go about solving that. I'll give you an example just from my own career. I worked for a major publisher of high school yearbooks for a while, and they've been a SDG customer as well. And as we were thinking about different product work, I remember one of the first things we did, and it's a very complex ecosystem. You got a group of high school students telling the story of a school year, and then the whole group graduates, so you got to bring in a new group of high school students telling the story of the school year, and they got to make sure that they're covering the whole class. I mean, if they forgot that the Spanish club existed, and you look, there's German club and there's French club, and we forgot to do a
Spanish club.
These are all things that are real problems. And then you got angry parents who are spending a lot of money on these artifacts and things. So anyway, we created all these kind of interesting
digital. It seems trivial, but I've been there, Jason. These things matter.
Yeah, they totally do. But the point I was making is that for that company, we had mapped out an experience, and we picked a very particular use case, the cover designer. And we knew there were some kind of interesting things we could do, because there are some of these memory books have, embossing and gold foil and interesting textures and some really interesting effects that you can apply to the cover. And we created some new digital cover design tools fairly early in our journey towards product work, because that was a segment that could be, like we said, kind of put some borders around and create a great cover design experience with a lot of different interesting things you could do. And we ended up with some pretty cool, like 3D visualizations. Like if you select, pebbled grain with gold foil and it looks this way on a flat screen, what does it look like under the lights?
Because this is an online yearbook.
Yeah, no, this is a physical yearbook, but you don't know how that physical decision you're making will actually look when printed and manufactured.
Okay. So you're giving them a tool so they can see what
so that was one of the things we'd experimented with, cool. Which was pretty cool. Like render this in 3D and then you can see, put the light over here and you can see, the gold foil really shines in ways that you can't see when you're just looking at a flat 2D design tool, for example. Anyway, that was really cool. An example.
You had mentioned a case study with a large guitar manufacturer when we had spoken previously, and I wonder if you could share that story with our audience. And also, really, one of the reasons why I love this story is because this is a very disruptive time in our market, and I think a lot of companies are struggling with the bread and butter that they've always been able to rely on, and now they need to pivot and figure out, where does AI fit and who are their users and has their persona changed and, what is the expectations of the users? It just feels like a very sort of tumultuous pivot moment in our technology world. So I love the story because I think it helps show how product can help a company true up a traditional legacy product.
Yeah, and first of all, I want to give credit. It wasn't my case study. I had read about this from a product and UX leader named Jeff Gotthelf, and he had posted something on his blog, and there might have been a podcast or something about this case study. But I thought it was such a good example of a traditional brand, and the brand is Fender Guitars, who makes kind of an iconic physical, Stratocasters and Telecasters and amps and such, these iconic physical items, those guitars. And the blog post that Jeff had written was titled something like "How Good Product Management Saved Fender Guitars." And I thought there was some really interesting data in there, like the CEO and leaders of Fender realizing that their buyers of their physical product, again, these iconic guitars, electric guitars usually, were not necessarily guitar players. They were people who wanted to be guitar players, who were interested in becoming guitar players. And there's a lot of kind of intimidation and lack of knowledge that happens when you want to become a guitar player. And you're getting a guitar for the first time. So they recognized that there was an opportunity to overcome all that through great digital products. So they developed a couple of digital products. One was called Fender Play and another one's called Fender Songs. And they were these like communities and lessons and online content that was presented in kind of a non-intimidating, helpful to the beginner sort of way. And managing that whole digital system, like when you buy a new guitar, you can join the Fender Play community, and then you're going to have all this access to lessons and content that's going to help you learn how to use this new device that you just bought and didn't spend a small amount of money on either. And then they realized, then they've got people hooked. I can't remember exactly what the stats were, but it's something that 90% of their first-time guitar buyers end up abandoning the thing within the first year. And if they can get them over that first year and get them kind of hooked, they become lifetime buyers who are spending all sorts of money and buying, 7 guitars over the course of their lifetime, and amps and pedals and accessories and guitars for other people. So they recognize, it wasn't that hard for them to get to the point where they recognize that getting people to overcome that, the novice period or the true, dead beginner period, could result in, up to like $1 billion in potential lifetime revenue
Wow.
from these users. But again, the
Wow.
system wasn't make better guitars. The system that they needed to improve was um, offer
Digital.
these customers an experience so that they'll stick with the guitar and then become buyers of additional guitars, et cetera.
Mm.
So
Wow.
it's
You're
really a
just so
digital
correct.
product. Yeah.
Yeah. I just, we'll have to I'll put a link to that case study in the details of the
Yeah.
podcast, but really, really well done and also super accurate. Like during COVID, a lot of people, pick up a hobby, right? And I
Yeah.
was one
That
of
was
them.
a,
And I
yep.
was super intimidated to go to the guitar store. I'm like, I don't know how to buy a guitar. And another piece that was mentioned in the case study was that women are 50% of the buyers or something close to that. And they were
Interesting. Yeah.
surprised by that, to have that high,
Yep.
and very few salespeople are female. And so there was sort of this disconnect in the buying experience of the in-store experience. So yeah, investing in that digital experience and then creating a sticky environment where people have a sense of community and they don't give up because they have
Yeah.
lessons that they can
Yep.
afford, and super, super smart and really inspiring, I hope, for our listeners to think about, how else could you engage with your audience and really meet the real needs, the real challenge of like being intimidated,
Yeah.
getting
Yep.
frustrated, giving up, right? So some really great insights. Thank you for sharing those. Any other thoughts, Jason, about companies that are looking to renew their product journey? What are some of the challenges folks are facing and some guidance you might just recommend?
Yeah, and maybe I'll get here to, I know we talked about sharing some kind of key, a simple framework and some things you can
Yeah, yeah,
remember as you
yes.
move through your journey. And I hope I'm not jumping
No, it's
ahead and
perfect.
you're
No, it's great.
but one of the ways and this is so dorky, and the last thing the world needs is another product framework. So I apologize for saying I'll
No,
spin up
no.
another one, because there are a million acronyms that we use. But one that I use that helps me is PushMe, PushMe. And that's 6 simple letters that describe really 4 sentences or 4 little statements. The first is the P and the U, means that we start in the problem space, P for problem, with our users, U for
Super
users.
problem.
So that's a great place to start, is just understanding who users are. And before we build anything, we've got to do some discovery. We've got to figure out what the problem is that we're uniquely
Yeah,
equipped to solve, or an opportunity we can satisfy. And that's where we do things like get out of the building and interview and create user personas and
yeah.
watch what our users might need us to do. So we do that first. That's the P and the U. Then we move on to the S and the H, and that stands for how we actually go about delivering, and that's through solutions that test hypotheses. And that is intentionally scientific type of language that encourages us to use, maybe not formally, but at least in our mindset, kind of a scientific method where we're going to test things and learn from what we test,
Mm.
and then be willing to adapt all along the way.
Are you
We
talking about
don't
like
just
doing A/B strategies, or what does that mean? How do you
Yeah,
test
yeah,
it?
or just doing an initial test with a prototype, or maybe even a rough prototype, a paper prototype, and saying, let's sketch some things out and show them to users. And then when the
Ah,
users say, well, I would never use that part, but I like this part, then all
uh-huh.
we've invested is paper and ink,
Yeah.
versus what happens, I think, too often in a IT project model is, well, the first thing we need to do is define all our requirements. And then we start to say, well, the whole thing's got to do this. And then on the second page, it's going to do that. And then the next screen's going to do this. And we're going to take that data and move it to there. And then we've constructed this big thing that, again, makes sense maybe internally. But we haven't yet tested that hypothesis that actually is what the user needs.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's good prototyping practices, iterative delivery, and not just like meaning, well, we're gonna, break our work into 2-week sprints or whatever, and we're gonna have stand-up meetings at 9 o'clock every morning. That's all just kind of ceremony.
Yeah.
What we
Tactics.
really want to do is say we're going to deliver smaller chunks more frequently and learn from them and be willing to adapt.
Ah,
In fact, be obligated to adapt based on what
yeah.
we learned.
Yeah.
So solutions testing hypotheses is really that's the S and the H in this acronym.
I like it.
Yeah, and then we push me. The M stands for measurement and measuring to learn and respond and good measurement frameworks. We talked a little bit about that with leading indicators and lagging indicators and North Star frameworks and such. But just really celebrating when we produced a measurable outcome for our market versus measuring our, vanity metrics and things like, look how many story points we got done. Your users don't care about your story points. What's the outcome you delivered for them?
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us to the final letter in my acronym, which is E for an empowered team. And I'm not sure that empowered is exactly the right word, but the team is such an important vehicle in good product practices and good product work. They are, a product team that has this cross-functional abilities and psychological safety and trust each other. They are the vehicle that delivers value more even than an IT project is. And empowering that team and equipping them with what they need to be successful. That's, I think, many of your listeners here have been on great teams, not just, the high school football team, but I mean like a good work team that I was on where we had this kind of sense of a mission and we were supporting each other and we got a thing done and that thing was meaningful. And I've been fortunate to be on several of those sorts of teams in my career. And I think seeing them work well and figuring out how to enable that kind of experience is, that's a great way to end up with a great product.
Excellent. This Push Me framework that you've referred to, that's also in your North Star book. Is that right?
Nope.
No.
It isn't.
Okay.
No,
so we'll have to include that.
Yeah, it's just my own thing.
I love it. I love it because it's memorable. And I do think that you've pointed to some really key behaviors that allow an organization to really true themselves up to the intention of product, right?
Yeah.
To your point, it's not about vanity of like, we're moving from project to product, like some trend or something. It's really focused on making sure we're meeting the needs of our customers and empowering our teams. So thank you for that framework. I hope it's useful for those who are listening, and see the information below for some handy dandy resources and references. And we hope to see you on our next podcast. Jason, thanks so much for your insights and sharing your wisdom with our attendees today.
Thank you, Molly. I enjoyed it.
Hey, thanks for joining the Digital Innovation North podcast. For more SDG insights and access to all of our podcasts, please visit our webpage at solutiondesign.com.